Wayne Vogler has conducted research into ecology and management of herbaceous and woody species since 1996. So a very long time, not to say that you're old, Wayne. This includes rubber vine, Parthenium, novosedge, and most recently prickly acacia. He actually did his PhD in giant rat's tail grass management, and so he is the absolute guru, the expert, the man, the legend. The myth, the legend, he tells me, Dr. Wayne Vogler.
All right, so don't believe any of that. All right, it's all propaganda, that's what I reckon. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. I work out of Charters Towers these days, so when I do these trips I tend to spend a bit more time floating around the countryside and talking to people, which is really good. 30 years on rat's tail. It haunts me every day. It's scary stuff. But anyway, I want to have a discussion today really about, rat's tail grass, how we might deal with it. One of my little jokes is the doctor's in, but there is no prescription. Okay? And really these days we're talking about learning to live with it. And those kind of things, rather than just open a chemical drum and try and kill it. All right, so that's where we're moving to with rat's tail grass. All right, I'll probably skip through this pretty quickly. You guys all know what it is, but I do want to point out a couple of things. Both accidentally and deliberately introduced. There was some for evaluation for pasture and soil erosion control. All right, so it's in the records. We know it's competitive and long-lived, and it's adapted to many, many soil types, including saline soils. I've certainly seen it grow in the middle of saline seeps, big rat's tail established in there. So low to high fertility soils, it's not particularly picky. It'll do whatever it wants to do, acid to alkaline soils. So it's very widely adapted. Low drought and waterlogging tolerant. Okay, I've seen it stand in water for months, and I've seen it just go into hibernation in drought and then come back to life. Now, reproduction is by seed only, unless you have whole plants floating down the creek or something like that. All right, so reproduction is by seed only. So just some really simple basic facts about rat's tail. I'm probably not going to, just a couple of pictures. You all know what it looks like. Typical rat's tail grass seed heads. This one on the right, the one on the right. So you do get this seed head here at times, but nothing to worry about. It's just a bit of genetic variation from what I can understand. Just treat it and don't get too worried about it. Just manage it like you would manage rat's tail grass. I could tell you where all these are. So this is up near Gladstone, growing in some pretty bad soil, down a drainage line. It's doing very well. I always like putting this picture up. This picture is really about trying to understand the identification. Now, we probably frustrate you because you'll bring a sample in and you're pretty sure it's rat's tail, and we'll look at it and go, oh, we're not really sure. But the issue is, if you can see the arrows pointing to lower gloom and upper gloom, ID often reflects around the length and shape of those little tiny plant parts, which you need at least a by 10 magnification to really get your head around them, or a microscope. So field identification can be really difficult. The other issue we have, those things, depending sometimes where they occur on a seed head, they actually are slightly different. And so if that's our ID key, or a key plant part for identification, It might depend where you look on a seed head as to what you determine what it is. All right? So, but that's very typical of what you'll see, that little red seed. And then you've got the seed itself. So you'll see the little red dots with the little black bums in there. So they are the seed. What I want to say about those seed, and you might already know this, on a dewy morning, and particularly when they get wet, they've got this little coating that swells up, and it's just like clag glue, all right? So it's a little mucilage. If I run my hand through a seed head, it'll just stick to my hand like glue. If you're out mustering cattle on an early morning because you want to put them on the truck, and then in a rat's tail grass paddock, you, your dog, your horse, your quad bike, and all your cows will be carting rat's tail grass seed on them. Right? It's a tricky little thing, but for a weed and a plant, it's just out to make it, things for it to get spread around and survive. So it's one of the key things we need to consider when we're out, when it's dewy and wet, and, we all like to work in the cool. Well, it's doing things that make it more difficult for us to work in the cool. All right? So look at the red dots in Queensland. So they are confirmed herbarium specimens on the east coast of Queensland. If you look at the most western dots, Ralston, Springshaw, I'm just going to throw some names at you. Acadia Valley, Emerald, Charters Towers. Where do I describe that one? 200 k's northwest of Charters Towers. So it's certainly moving west, and it's moving there because it's moving largely by human activity. We like to shift it around, and just by doing things that we do. It's certainly present on the Western Downs and north of Roma. And I haven't included the stuff that goes into New South Wales, so as well. So it's very widespread, it's all over the place, and really when you were doing your normal business with livestock or whatever your business is, it's really up to you to make yourself aware of where it might be, and then look at how you might manage that risk of spread. Okay, so just be careful when you're out and about. Also remember, once your quad bike or vehicle is contaminated, you will never, ever, ever get it totally clean. You might get it 80% clean. You might get it 90% clean. I heard a figure the other day that a wash down takes 60% of the seed out. And I don't know how true that is, but that's what they were quoting to me. So we've just got to be really careful how we're going to manage it and how we're going to shift around. I've heard many anecdotes about people with two properties. One has rat's tail, one doesn't. Only stuff from the clean property moves to the rat's tail property. If it ever goes there, it never comes back. All right? And that's the lengths that some people go to try and keep their property clean, that they know is clean. All right, so we humans are the main mover in our normal activity, whether that's shifting livestock, doing normal property activities, fighting fires, I was talking to a gentleman before, and those kind of things. All right, so we can blame lots of people, we can blame things, but the only thing we can control is our activity. All right? We can't control the neighbours, we can't control the feral animals unless we fence them out or do some other activity. All right, so, and why should we care? Well, you guys will know. Now I'm going to use this term ecosystem function. Don't get scared by it, because all it means is, so in a beef production ecosystem, it means that the ecosystem is producing and functioning relatively similarly to what it would be like if the rat's tail wasn't there, all right? So what that means for production, it means you're still being productive, still making some money out of it, and those kind of things, all right? So that's a production system. In an environmental system, it reduces biodiversity, native flora, fauna, exclusion or extinction, and those kind of things. So it's just about maintaining the ecosystem and keeping it relatively functional and doing what it should be doing. So, like I said, from a production system, it's still productive, it's still producing, you're still making some money. In an environmental system, it means that we're not making too many things extinct. It looks relatively similar to what it would look like, if the rat's tail wasn't there, okay? It increases wildfire risk simply because there's a lot of grass. And because livestock don't utilise it that much, it's there all the time. And so bigger wildfires, harder to control, those kind of things, low feed value. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, except on young fresh growth. And you'll know this, it tends to form near monocultures. All right, so part of our job is to stop it going to monoculture. I've got to put this in. So the legal requirements, it's really critical that you understand this. So it's a Category 3 invasive plant under the Biosecurity Act. And what it says is a person must not release this plant into the environment, so deliberately, give away or sell as a seed plant or something infested with its seeds. So think about this in terms of the Act. If you knowingly load livestock onto a truck and they've got seed in the gut, you're contravening the Act. It's that simple, all right? Because the seed is being moved, it's going into the livestock. You're not selling the seed, but you're shifting it off your property, down the road, and those kind of things. But the Act doesn't actually require us to have a clean property. It says we must take reasonable and practical measures to minimise the risk. So, in terms of the livestock, if you could spell them and empty them out and then put them on a truck, you would be meeting your responsibilities. And I'll talk about time periods for that a bit later. All right, so if you're keeping your boundary relatively clean and putting some buffers in just so you're not annoying your neighbour so much, you'd be meeting your responsibility, all right? But it's reasonable and practical, and it will probably be different from landholder to landholder based on their business model, capability, landscape. I mean, we don't want you going climbing cliffs, killing rat's tail, okay? And those kind of things. So just think reasonable and practical, and you'll be okay in that respect. So how do we manage? It's really thinking about biosecurity risk reduction, understanding how the seed moves, and then seed movement reduction, maybe doing some herbicide application, some buffers, careful about where you shift your machinery. Livestock empty, competitive species. So I think where we can plant and use competitive species or pasture species to maintain vegetation cover, that's something we should really be looking at. Early intervention on small infestations. Don't ever walk past the first plant you see, because generally we as landholders get busy, and I'll get back to that, and sometimes we don't. All right, so if you can clean up the first few you see, then you can actually start looking, you'll know it's around and you'll keep an eye out for it for a start. But it's super critical when we look at long-term management. Take out the first few, know where they are or were, and keep an eye on it and monitor them. Fencing. Sometimes you'll see in landscapes and you'll see this paddock and there'll be some GRT down on one flat and the rest of the paddock looks pretty clear, yet we let livestock run all across that paddock. And so you're setting yourselves and the landscape up for a big problem moving forward, because we know what livestock do, they'll just shift it all over the place. So fencing can be useful, only because it allows you to manage two different areas and manage them differently. Okay, so if you could fence it off, it means you could be really tough down in that that couple of acres in the corner. If you don't fence it off, you're just going to spread it everywhere. All right, so just think about that in your context of how you manage. So, a few numbers to throw at you now. Seed banks measured. It's not uncommon to get up to 10,000 per metre squared in heavy infestations. Persistent, 3 to 10 years. And soil seed banks. High seed production. So just measured out at Gympie back 30 years ago in rat's tail grass. Dense rat scale, 85,000 seeds per square metre produced per year. And that's across, so, work on 500 seeds per seed head or inflorescence. So it's a lot. So we do know that it can actually produce seed any time of year if moisture and temperature are okay. So not when it's frosty, it's too cold, but certainly you'll have mild winters. That's when it can still keep producing seed if it's got some soil moisture. And high viability. So of all those 85,000 seeds per square metre, 90% are viable. So you've got 75,000 popping into there. So probably just to scare you a bit really about that. So just numbers, so you understand it's probably one of the best weeds out there in terms of doing what it does. I just want to talk to you about seed longevity. So this is my data from a long time ago. If you look at the blue line, we buried seeds. That was at Gander, at Brian Pastures. And almost 10 years it took till the last one was gone. Just sitting in the soil. Now, given that's a drier environment than here, so my expectation here is that would probably be reduced a little bit. Now, the red line is where we did continuous cultivation for 2 years. And we dropped the seed bank really, really low. Okay, so we didn't grow anything. We're experimenting to see what soil disturbance, shallow soil disturbance at about 6 weekly intervals would actually do to the seed bank. So all we were doing was stimulating germination. And after 2 years, we dropped that to less than 5% of the seed bank. So that's why you'll see in lots of literature where they talk about if you can cultivate, it's probably a good option, and growing some pastures or fodder crops for a couple of years to stimulate it, and then dropping that seed bank down and then going back and sowing a more permanent pasture, if that's an option for you. This is the one that's going to be a bit of a kicker for a few. So all this graph is telling you 7 days to empty a cow out. So this is measured data. This is picking up behind cows and washing manure out. So 7 days. So if you think about it, it's a long time in terms of, livestock management and trying to feed cattle on clean stuff for 7 days. I don't underestimate and I understand some of the logistics of this. It's not sometimes easy, not an easy thing to do. All right, but this is the reality. 7 days to empty livestock out. So think about how you might do that in terms of managing, buying cattle out of sale yards that you don't know where they've come from, and those kind of things. What we would start thinking about is spelling cattle in yards when you get them home for a period to empty them out. So you try and put all whatever's in their gut in one area, and then you can patrol that area and control what comes up. But if you think about it, if I've got rat's tail and I put cattle on a truck and I send them to a sale, so, you know, they might be half a day on the truck, wherever they're dropping their poop, feces, shit, whatever you want to call it, along the road, you're potentially dropping rat's tail. And then what happens the next year? What happens to a vehicle that runs through that on the road? So these are some of the realities around shifting rat's tail grass around. If we can stop it at the farm gate, we save a lot of issues for other people. We all like to pick on councils and main roads people for having dirty roadsides, but sometimes we are the contributor to that by our actions with our livestock. All right, so just something to consider in terms of that. I'm actually just going to go around that. But think about it on your property too. You might have clean areas and dirty areas, and think about how you might rotate livestock through those areas. It's really actually important for the long-term sort of management of your property. It's good to keep the dirty areas dirty if you can, and the clean areas cleaner. Okay, so something to consider. Now, one myth to dispel. How many times have you heard people say, rat's tail blows in the wind? Well, I'm here to tell you today, it doesn't. It just doesn't. Okay, so if you hear people saying it, just tell them it's a load of BS, because it doesn't do that. Seed spread is from dropping from plants, movement by animals, domestic or feral, vehicles, clothing, all the things we've been talking about. If you buy hay, be very careful where you buy it from. On vehicles and water. Mostly it'll move in water stuck to other things, down creeks and that sort of thing. But I'm just going to show you some data we collected at Gympie many years ago now. So these were on plants about 2 metres tall. And all this is telling you that a plant standing 2 metres tall, blowing in the wind, in the storms, all that kind of stuff, only drops seeds 3 metres away. All right? And that's not wind, it's plant doing this and flicking it. Okay? So real measured data, not hearsay, not anything else. So what this actually starts telling us, if we do want to put a buffer in, a grassed buffer, to help us manage spread, 3 metres is the bare minimum, 5 is better, maybe 10 is better than that. All right? So you need more than a vehicle width. 2 vehicle widths would be great, and maybe half a vehicle after that. All right? As a buffer, to try and help reduce spread. The other thing it does, gives you a clean thing to drive on, so you're not actually spreading it as well, okay? So, you know, one of the critical first things in property management is try and keep your tracks clean, so you can drive around and not shift it everywhere. Get a lot of questions about fire. What I would say is that GRT plants in themselves are highly tolerant of fire. If you want to see a good GRT crop, put a fire in and don't do anything else afterward. It stimulates it. Best seed crops I've ever seen on rat's tail grass are after a fire. But fire can reduce the soil seed make by up to 50%. So nice little things to think about it, and what I would say is fire plus something. All right, fire on its own is not the answer. Well, it could be. I mean, it does produce fresh green pick and livestock will eat that. But generally you need to do something next after the fire. And that could be some herbicide, it could be planting other pastures or whatever it could be, but fire plus something. Maybe fire plus flogging it and keeping it short might be an answer. But be bearing in mind, if you've got other pastures in there, you'll be giving them a really flogging as well. All right, so just keep that in mind as well. I've just talked about this slide. So I'm probably just going to move on. Just to talk a little bit about herbicides. So glyphosate or Roundup or glyphosate 360, 450, 700, I don't know what the numbers go up to now, but they're getting higher all the time. So I don't want to dwell on this too much, but in terms of rat's tail grass management, it doesn't have any residual activity, and you guys will know this, it just kills, and you've got to spray it on green stuff, so plants have to be actively growing for the best results. You can use it through wick wipers, boom sprays, drones, you name it, that's fine. The next question is, some seed will still be produced while the plants die, and the withholding period on the label is 1 day for grazing. All right, so that's one of the options. One of the big questions I get asked is, okay, what impact does that glyphosate have on seed? And in reality, it has very little impact. Most of the seed, if you're spraying it and you've got seed heads that are green, most of the seed on them will be viable at the end. And it's not peculiar to rat's tail, it's common across a whole range of different plants, from herbaceous plants to grasses to trees and shrubs, all right? So not many herbicides actually have an effect on seeds once that seed is formed, even if it's very immature, all right? So, but what this data tells us is that you've probably got about a week after the anthers appear. So the anthers are those little fluffy things on the outside. That's your pollen. You've probably got about a week after they appear, and anything you do after that, there'll be more seed survive. I mean, you still have to kill the plant, but just information that you're not actually killing many seed with the herbicides. This is the one we want to talk about, isn't it? Flupropanate. I don't really want to talk about it, but we will. It's certainly selective at registered rates. If you put more on than the registered rates, you might have bare ground for a number of years. The best thing I can say about this is read the label. Labels are there for a reason. They're not to be ignored. They're the legal document that says if you apply it using this method and abide by the label, you are abiding the law. If you tip that extra glug into your spray tank and go, stuff it, we're really going to get up at this time, you're not. And then you will probably start damaging other grasses. You will more than likely start seeing bare patches from where you've applied it. And those bare patches can last for a number of years. And those kind of things. So be careful. Use it as the label says. You can apply it when plants are green or frosted. It doesn't matter because it's got to get from the leaf to the ground before it's going to do anything. It's actually got to get into the soil. So we're really using plants we can see as a target to apply it. Okay, nothing more. And in fact, probably the best time to apply it is September, October, in your driest time of year, coming into when it's not growing that well and coming into its growing time, into mid to late spring. It's certainly slow acting, and all the seeds that are produced in that 3 to 4 months while it's dying are viable. All right? Residual activity can be quite variable, 6 to 12 months. In sandy coastal soils, or I like to sometimes say sugarcane soils, where you only use the soil to stand the plant in, nothing more. And heavier clay soils, it might be longer. Okay, so, and particularly where the rainfall is a bit lower. So where your rainfall is more, that with residual period will be shorter. I've talked about this, so it can be applied any time of year and so on. I'll flick through that. All right, withholding periods. You may not be able to read the yellow bits, but they're the critically important bits. So when you apply or use flupropanate, and what I want to say is I'm going to show you two different labels, because there are two different ones out there at the moment. Hopefully that'll be resolved and there'll be one label only. But spot spraying, there's an initial 14-day withholding period. Spot spraying is not using a boom spray, it's using a handgun and those kind of things. 14 days. But if you put your livestock on after that 14-day initial withholding period, you then have to take them off, put them on clean feed for 14 days, or an area. Clean feed means an area never sprayed with flupropanate in this context. And then before they can go for slaughter. There is no end date on that. So bear that in mind, there is no end date. Once it has been sprayed with flupropanate, either spot spray, boom spray, aerial, there is no end date. Livestock for slaughter will always be required, until more research is done perhaps, will always be required by law to be spelled on clean feed for 14 days before they go to slaughter. The other thing it says is do not graze stock, and particularly dairy stock or your house cow. Do not have them on there if you're going to use it for human consumption. All right, so be really careful. It still applies if you're going to boom spray, except the initial withholding period is 4 months. Right, so that's one label. This other label says, and the key difference is that lactating animals producing milk for human consumption must not be grazed in treated areas, period. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And really have to think about that when in the context of how you're going to manage rat's tail on your property. I'm not going to talk about this. Nick's going to talk more about, I just want to highlight some potential pasture replacement species where that is an option. And this picture for me is really important because how you manage your rat's tail down on the flat versus up on the hill might be quite different. And this might be where your fencing comes in. Because suitable species, if you're going to replace them down on the flat, might be actually quite different to what you might do up on that ridge behind. And therefore, some fencing might be really useful to start dividing that up and looking at how we might manage that quite differently. Okay. I just want to show you some pictures before we move on. And so 3 years of annual slashing or fire and you've still got rat's tail grass. All right? So slashing and or fire on their own will actually just make your problem worse or keep it the same. In fact, it'll probably just go from a few rat's tail grass plants to having more and more and more. Right, so important to think about how you might use slashing. So in a more integrated system, this is pretty much dense or was dense rat's tail grass, and one slash, one task force or one flupropanate spray and seeding with signal grass. So this was done up near Miriambar. And the next picture is a year later. So we've got signal grass established now. A bit of rhodes grass poking in the back. And then after the next growing season, we had a pretty good stand of signal grass ready to be grazed. And that's how, when you integrate the slashing plus herbicide plus sowing seed, rather than just doing one of them, you can actually have quite a good result over a relatively short time. And that's important to note. But, you know, we were a little bit fortunate. We had some rain that was timely and those kind of things. But just to demonstrate, in 2 years, how you might be able to swap this country, or, you know, swap heavily infested country across to having something. Now, what I do want to say, if we went and heavily grazed that and didn't look after it, we'd flip it back to rat's tail probably in 2 years as well. So grazing management is one of the key things. On my drive down from Charters Towers, I saw lots of country that looked a little bit like there's board up here. And at this time of year, that's the worst condition you can have country in if you have some rat's tail on your property. Right? Because we just open it up for invasion and more rat's tail to occur. So that's why I say grazing management is probably one of the super key things in keeping cover on the ground and keeping whatever pasture species you have in relatively good nick, because it is actually the first line of defence against weed infestation, is your pasture condition. So again, this was a boom spray with task force, some seed established, put some seed in, and if you just look at the green one, we started with 86% rat's tail grass, and over a couple of years we pushed it to 40% signal grass. And the bottom one, when we did a boom spray, we went from 90% rat's tail through to 76 or 86% signal grass. So it can change. I mean, we didn't graze it, we didn't have opportunity to, but certainly during that period, a light graze would have actually been really beneficial for the signal grass. Right, so it can be done and it can flip quite quickly. There's been a lot of talk about fertilizer. So I just want to show you some data on how fertilizer can change it. Whether it's economically viable to do, that's a whole nother story. Okay, so I'm not an economist or an ag economist, so I'm not going to, but just to demonstrate what we can do. So if you look at that coloured in line, there's a lot of N and a lot of P added. So crude protein is nearly 9%. So we mowed this, so we slashed it first, and then we put the fertiliser on. 5 weeks after we put the fertiliser on, we had 16% protein. And if you look across to, and then as the plant matured and started to put stems, it went back to 9, which is typical for a lot of grasses. But if we could graze it in that period, and this would be an option perhaps where you've got a lot of rat's tail and you might want to get some benefit out of it in terms of grazing value. All right? The digestible matter also went from 42% to 56%. So that's not low, that's not particularly high when you compare it to like a Soteria leaf or a signal grass leaf. But in terms of the change, it's really quite significant in terms of utilisation by livestock. Okay, so again, something else to consider and think about. And the one on the left is the unfertilised, and the condition of it on the right. And it does actually just look tastier, doesn't it? All right, so softer, bigger, darker green leaves that are going to provide more nutrition. And livestock will eat that in concept. So in terms of having competitive pastures and fertiliser, there's been some work done and around adding fertiliser enables livestock, instead of going, I'll eat signal grass, rat's tail, go around that, signal grass with your cattle. They'll go signal grass, rat's tail, signal grass. It forces them, and they will use it. So what that means is you're putting the same amount of grazing pressure on your rat's tail grass as you're putting on the rest, instead of livestock avoiding it. So again, something to think about. Again, this one's a little bit more. So this was a slashing and a wick wipe and fertiliser. And again, we've been able to turn it to pretty much a monoculture of signal grass in a short period, which is useful for rat's tail grass management. But if you drive past this plot today, we finished our work and the landholder went back to his usual flogging, and it flipped in a year from that back to a monoculture of rat's tail because it still had a very big seed bank. Okay? So competitive pasture is about stopping rat's tail grass establishing and providing livestock with useful fodder. That's really what they're about, and a competitive option. So I just want to talk a little bit more about some other management principles. When I hear people say controlling rat's tail grass, it means they're out killing it, in my mind. We need to start move from the actual thing of I'm controlling my rat's tail grass to looking at long-term management. And it's very critical that we do that, because killing rat's tail means that's my life. I kill rat's tail, and I look at it and I've got to pick up something and go and kill it. I've seen lots of guys that just don't sleep well at night. They look like nervous wrecks because all they think about is killing rat's tail. Management starts thinking like this: minimising impact, maintaining productivity, maintaining profit. Or, if you're an environmental land manager, maintaining environmental outcomes. Now, what that means is we're not giving up the ghost, we're just changing tack a bit. Right? We're not letting rat's tail run riot, we're changing tack so that we can survive as landholders, still run our beautiful cattle that we like running, or whatever we want, or our lifestyle, and all those kind of things. But the reality is, if you as a producer don't make a profit, you don't stay on your land very long, right? You have to make money. And so we look at profit, economic analysis, getting some really good advice around the economics of using these different things to manage rat's tail. And we might, if we are doing those things, that single plant in the paddock or the two plants down the back don't become that important anymore, because I'm managing my land well. All right? I'm managing my land well, maintaining cover, keeping my pastures in good nick. If it's a sown pasture, providing some nutrition, whether it's in a bag or whether it's from a chicken farm, I don't really care. I'm not into that argument. These improved pastures need some nutrition, and so on. And then we start looking at maintaining productivity rather than just killing rat's tail. All right? So we become land managers, not GRT control team. And that's super important. What it might also mean is that you might have to analyse your business a little bit. I might not be able to fatten those cattle all the time. Or if I'm wall-to-wall rat's tail, I'll put some effort into paddocks that I can use as fattening paddocks and keep them relatively clean and good nick. It might mean I become a breeding operation rather than, backgrounding or whatever it might be. But the business model probably needs to be analysed a little bit in this whole thing as well, just to see, because you're still going to maintain profit, and you've got to maintain productivity. If doing a lot of work on your rat's tail is not an option, it might actually mean that there are options out there to provide a supplement rather than using a chemical in a drum, but provide a supplement to help your livestock manage with rat's tail and keep their productivity up. All right, again, I'm not an animal nutrition person, but I do know of people doing that and having a fair bit of success around providing a supplement that helps your livestock use the rat's tail that's there. All right, things to consider. All right, I may have talked about all of this, but I talk to many landholders and they look at their rat's tail paddock and I say, what do you want this to look like in 5 years? And they go, I've got no idea. If you don't know what your paddock's going to look for in 5 years or what you want it to look like, no one can help you get there. No advice will help you get there because you don't know. All right, so clear objectives. Minimising impact. Herbicides, if you think your answer is in a drum that's got task force written on it, you're kidding yourself, literally. All right, straight talk, be frank. You're kidding yourself. Herbicide alone will not do the job. And it might be too expensive now anyway. All right, so we look at big picture land management outcomes, pasture management, all these things in the toolkit. And the way I look at herbicides is they're one thing in the toolbox and we use them very strategically to push the country or push the pasture system where we want it. 1 or 2 strategic applications may be what it needs. If you're in more native pastures, it might not be possible to push it that far. And that's where living with rat's tail becomes a very real thing that needs to happen. My second last dot point, there's no quick fixes. I'm telling you what you already know. And eradication. So when I talk about eradication, I talk about having 0 seeds in the soil. Other people talk about eradication when they can't see a living plant. All right, so different concepts. But eradication, I don't think we should even consider that until maybe we're 5 or 10 years into a management program where we've reduced it to next to no visible plants, and then we might think about eradication after that. All right. A couple of situation pictures here. The grass growing under the rat's tail here is actually kikuyu. If I had kikuyu, I would feed it, give it some nutrition. I could whip wipe that with glyphosate, or I mightn't even need to. Because if good kikuyu should actually walk over rat's tail grass and really outcompete it. Now, not everyone's got kikuyu, there's kikuyu around. And if kikuyu is not doing the job for you, it's likely that it's been pushed too hard. All right, so again, here's my nice signal grass patch here. The one I said 2 years later it was back to rat's tail. All right, so just something to consider, something to really think about is if you have really good sown pastures, maintaining them is really critical. All of our sown pastures will need nutrition to really thrive and really go well. Remember, if you give it some N or P or whatever after some work or soil testing, you do grow more grass to feed more cattle, okay? If I go and spray it and kill the rat's tail grass out, I'm actually not improving my grass growth. I'm just killing rat's tail, right? So the chemicals are cost and may not give you a return. Feeding your improved pasture actually gives you $1 return. All right, so it needs to be considered Again, I'm not an economist, so you guys with your advisors will have to do the math on that, okay, around that. All right, I'm probably going to leave it there. I only have that one to go. So I'm a little bit ahead of time, but that's okay. And we can move forward after that. So, look, I hope that's been useful. I'll be around most of the day, so if you have any burning questions, just come and have a chat to me. I'm big enough, you should be able to find me in the crowd.
Wayne, you surprised me. I wasn't ready for you to finish so early.
Well, I'm sorry.
Is it breaking your heart, is it?
What is?
Well, the situation that we're dealing with here.
Oh, I don't know whether it's breaking my heart. I think there's some really good answers, but there's probably some tough decision as landholders we need to make and as land managers, with some good advice and tough decisions about what the future's going to look like for us.
If there was one key message you could provide everyone, what would that be?
Is there one? I don't know. I think there some key messages is to just try and understand how it moves and spreads and put some things in place to start limiting that. Also, keep pastures in good condition. First line of defence against any weed or any weed establishing is pastures or grasslands or whatever you've got in really good condition. If it's an environmental area, try and keep it intact and in good condition. Because if it's not in good condition, it can't, one, it's not going to be super productive or do what you want it to do, and two, it's not going to be there to protect the landscape from invading weeds. Right, so probably that's a couple of key messages.